It started off like any other Friday night in our quiet town of Lexington, Virginia. I was 27, working as a dental hygienist at a small local practice, and like many young professionals, I looked forward to weekends like a lifeline. My name is Erica Barnes, and this is the story of a party night I will never forget, but not for the reasons most people might expect. My best friend, Cassidy Miller, had just gotten a big promotion at her marketing firm in Richmond. Naturally, she wanted to celebrate, and since we hadn't had a real night out in months, we decided to go all out. Cassidy booked a luxury Airbnb in the city, invited a close-knit group of friends, and even arranged for a private DJ. I was hesitant at first. I'd just come off a rough week at work filled with cancellations, a problematic crown procedure, and a nagging cold that I couldn't quite shake. But Cassidy was persuasive in that way only best friends can be. "Erica, you need to let go," she said while holding a pair of glittery heels in one hand and her phone in the other. "This is going to be one for the books." So I gave in. We drove up to Richmond Friday evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The Airbnb was stunning, an old brick townhouse with restored wooden floors, vaulted ceilings, and a rooftop patio overlooking the city skyline. There were fairy lights strung up along the patio, bowls of chips and guac set out on the counters, and music already pulsing through the walls when we arrived. People started arriving by 8. There was Mason and Jaden, Cassidy's co-workers who had a hilarious banter going at all times. Melissa, my old college roommate, showed up with her fiancé, Brian. Even Thomas Hayes, a guy I'd crushed on during senior year of high school, strolled in with his unmistakable charm and that familiar twinkle in his eyes. By 10, the party was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the rooms, and the rooftop was filled with bodies dancing to music that seemed to blur time. For a while, I forgot about my long week. I let myself dance with Cassidy, sing off-key to old 90s hits, and sip a cocktail that tasted like sunshine and sugar. When Thomas pulled me aside and asked me to catch up, I thought maybe the universe was finally throwing me a bone. We talked for nearly an hour on the rooftop, watching the city below. I laughed more than I had in months. He told me about his job as a physical therapist, how he'd just moved back to Virginia from Colorado, and how he hadn't expected to run into someone familiar at a party like this. I told him about my work, how exhausting but rewarding it could be, and how I'd recently started taking pottery classes on weekends to find some peace. The air was cool, and the sky full of stars, and everything felt like it was falling into place. But around midnight, things shifted. I was walking back into the kitchen to refill my drink when I heard someone call my name. "Erica." "Hey, wait up." It was Melissa. Her face was flushed, but not from the alcohol. She looked panicked. "Can you come with me?" "It's Brian, something's wrong." I followed her quickly to the downstairs guest room. Brian was sitting on the bed, head in his hands, sweating profusely. His shirt was soaked through, and his eyes darted around the room like he didn't recognize anyone. "He said he felt dizzy, then started shaking," Melissa whispered. "He hasn't had that much to drink, I swear." I knelt in front of Brian, trying to get his attention. "Hey, Brian. It's Erica. Look at me." He blinked at me, his breath ragged. "I'm cold," he said, shivering despite the warmth of the room. As I reached out to check his pulse, I noticed his skin was clammy, and his heart was racing like it was trying to outrun something. My mind clicked into gear. This wasn't intoxication. It looked like some kind of reaction. "Has he eaten anything unusual tonight?" I asked Melissa, who was shaking now too. "Just the spinach dip and some of the shrimp skewers," she said. "Why?" "Call 911, I said firmly. "Now." I stayed with Brian while Melissa fumbled for her phone. He started to slur his words, and for a terrifying second, I thought he might pass out completely. I asked someone to bring water and ice packs. A few of Cassidy's friends helped, clearly shaken. Others had started to notice that something was wrong, and the mood of the party shifted dramatically. The paramedics arrived within 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like an hour. Brian was semi-conscious by then, and Melissa was in tears. The EMTs moved swiftly, hooking Brian up to oxygen and monitoring his vitals. I stood back, watching the chaos unravel around me. The music had stopped. The rooftop emptied. Cassidy had shut down the DJ. Before they wheeled Brian out, one of the paramedics turned to me and said, "You did the right thing calling us. It looks like anaphylaxis. Could have been fatal if you hadn't acted quickly." Anaphylaxis. A severe allergic reaction. I didn't even know Brian had allergies. Melissa didn't either. But it was clear something in the food had triggered it. Later, they would find out it was the shrimp skewers. Brian had a shellfish allergy he hadn't disclosed to anyone because, in his words, it had never been that serious before. The rest of the night dissolved into quiet conversations, reassurances, and people slowly gathering their things to leave. Cassidy hugged me tightly, her voice shaking. "I can't believe this happened. Thank you for keeping it together." I didn't feel like I had. I felt like I was on the edge of something I didn't quite understand. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room of the Airbnb, staring at the ceiling. The memory of Brian's face burned into my mind. I thought about how one fun evening had turned into something potentially tragic. How everything can change in a blink. The next morning, we got a call from Melissa. Brian was stable and recovering at the hospital. The doctors confirmed the allergic reaction, and they expected him to make a full recovery. She thanked me again and again, saying she didn't know what she would have done without me. When I returned home that Sunday, I found myself changed. It wasn't just that I'd acted under pressure. It was the realization that life can turn on a dime. That joy and crisis can exist in the same breath. That a party you thought would be unforgettable because of romance or fun, or dancing might actually stick in your mind for the sheer fragility it exposed. Weeks went by. Cassidy resumed her work in Richmond, and I went back to the dental office. But something lingered. Thomas texted me a few times, and we met for coffee once or twice, but I couldn't quite connect the same way we had that night. It felt like that chapter had closed along with the music. Instead, I started volunteering with a local health outreach group, teaching basic CPR and emergency response skills to high schoolers and community members. It felt like the right thing to do. Like maybe that night had happened to steer me towards something more meaningful. Melissa and Brian eventually sent out thank you cards. Mine came with a handwritten note. "You saved his life. We'll never forget it." I still think about that night. The sparkle of lights on the rooftop.